So this is the code snippet that I sent around. You open it.
I just realized I can't actually.
Let me. So, there we go. So last week we just went through basically lines 12 through about 45 to 6. So we didn't really cover a whole lot. That's okay. So Diane suggested that maybe it'd be beneficial to even talk about just some general concepts about programming languages and Python in particular. So before we even get into this, um, you should have, if you log into the terminal server, there should be a Python shell available called idle, IDLE. So if you log in to, yeah, the terminal server there. If you want to install it on your own laptop, you just go to python.org and download and install the 3.4. Yeah. Don't be alarmed, Brennan, I'm a half release behind, but don't worry about that. So, okay, so what we're going to go cover today is not very long. So, what you have running here to get idle going is basically an interactive shell that you can type in code one line at a time and have it evaluate it. So, basically, if I could type in anything here, the shell is going to evaluate that as a Python sort of statement or expression. So typically, in most programming languages, sort of the unit of execution is either what we call a statement or more sort of colloquially, just a line of code. But when you're in the shell, anytime you type in anything, hit enter, it's going to go in and kind of process that as a Python expression. So a really basic use of the shell is to use it as sort of a glorified calculator. So for example, if I just wanted to do addition, 1 plus 1, I hit enter, it goes and it sends and it evaluates a number 1 plus number 1, and then you saw it return 2. So, so you use this. And in fact, I use this is probably one of the most. I typically in my work day, one of the first things I open is a Python shell, and one of the last things I close down at the end of the day is Python. So I do a lot of my interactive work in Python, and so you can do a lot of things even with this shell itself. So when I'm programming, typically what I do is I test out ideas in the shell before actually talking it over or writing it itself. So another important concept is the concept of variables in Python. So a variable is just really a name of something. So really a generic. So I can name something and refer to that later in my code. So a really simple. So let's see, back to high school algebra. I just want to say x equals 1. So here I'm assigning the variable named x to the number 1 or integer of 1. If I do that and then hit enter, nothing really happened. All I did was just assign that, but I haven't done anything to it. So this would be considered one line Python code or just a Python expression. So now if I type in x and hit enter, it just returns 1. So now instead of referring to 1 in my code, I can refer to this variable x. And so x can take on whatever So if I wanted to say, okay, I want to save, I'll just do that. And instead of a number, I want to put in what's called a string or some characters. So, if I just want to say, okay, Tutt library, I want to refer to that string in my code as y, so I assign it, and then I retrieve it, and there we can see it again. There's Tutt library.
I'm a little bit familiar with that code and common core theory.
Okay.
And that sounds a lot like when you're assigning fields. Is it kind of similar?
Yeah, similar in concept. So doubling core is really,
It's not permanent.
yeah, it's not a program, right? But yeah, the concept is sort of similar, yeah. But here, unlike in doubling core, if I have a doubling core record, for example, and I've created all the fields for that, I can't necessarily change it in my code per se. I'm going to have to do some other manipulation of that.
Or use it as like 1+1.
Right. I don't really, but I can. I shouldn't say that because I can manipulate it programmatically, but I'm going to have to do something to it. I'm going to have to read it in. I do this in XML, so I have to read it in XML parser, and then I can manipulate it in Python. But here, this is really more general that because we use variables all the time. So with that sort of really quick introduction to variables, here sort of is the py_mark code snippet. And so last time I talked a little bit about classes. Classes are just a way to sort of, in Python and other programming languages, as a way to organize your code and to do what's called encapsulation. And all that really means is that I can hide some of the implementation details in my code, so I can manipulate symbols and change things and sort of hide it from other programs that may use this sort of structure. So it's a way to sort of hide programming operations and manipulations. And open source, all that means is that they provide that actual source code available for people to use. And py_mark is, really quick, is one of the most widely used Python libraries for manipulating mark records by Ed Summers. He's the original creator. I've actually contributed code to this project. And I know a lot of the people involved in this community. So of all the open source community, I'm probably the most involved in this py_mark. A lot of what I do on day-to-day manipulation for our catalog, I do using py_mark. So I think it's really useful, cool to have in your toolkit, especially getting the hero library and everything with one records.
Yeah, I was talking to a friend of mine who was a Google, and about a year ago, I said, hey, I'm learning Python, and I'm working on a library project. And I wasn't working on this, but the first thing he said is, oh, are you working on py_mark stuff? Because he is just part, he's not working with that in any way, shape, or form, but it's important enough that he's heard about it. It was the first thing he thought of when he heard code plus library.
Right, for sure. And I a lot of my code is py_mark. So, I mean, one of the big uses, Christine and I have used py_mark to manipulate our mark records before loading them. So we get a big mark record set from our vendors, and oftentimes those mark records are really terrible. So by sort of scripting that, instead of using like mark edit, manually go in and manipulate it, we've sort of automated all that into code. So all she has to do is upload the file she gets from a vendor. We manipulate it, and then she saves it back after it's been modified, and then we upload that into Python. So that's just one example. I'm using it.
Maybe too basic.
No, it's not. No, I don't want to know. It's not.
What is Python
it's called a dynamic high-level language, programming language. It's widely used in all sorts of different industries. There's been a big, I want to say, explosion of use in the past 2 or 3 years in big data applications and data analytics. I was at PyCon, the big PyCon conference in 2014 last year, and there's a lot of sessions on using Python for data visualizations and things like that. I've been using Python since 2001 for a while. It's okay. And I think it's it's a kind of one of those languages that I recommend if you're just starting out, you just really need to understand and use. So I think that's been helpful too. You can see here, this is legitimate Python code, and hopefully you don't worry about the actual syntax, but what I'm really concerned about is trying to understand sort of the structure of the program.
And you can use this to do all kinds of things. I actually want that because of this kind of thing. I could have done some myself, but I actually just worked out. I built a little database to manage my student records. Information that I want to keep track of, like when I started working on that kind of stuff, and I have functions in there that I can graduate things, like some of those here. So once you know it, it was like any random things that you don't want to have to do manually, or you don't want to have to do as manually.
Right, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I said, I use it all the time, also. So HTML is a markup language, and so it's a way to kind of structure information. Python is a full programming environment. PyMark is sort of the big open source library for using the manipulating mark record in Python. So that's why I think it's kind of useful to actually go and look at the actual code that's in PyMark. So, so this class, if we go up here to the top, sort of the structure here, this is in its own field.py file. And this is actually posted on GitHub. And so you kind of see right here. So what this is, this field represents a field in a mark record. How familiar? But yeah, of course, I know what that is. But so mark records typically start with a leader, and then it starts with 001, and then it goes, you can have up to 999 fields. And then each of these fields can be one of 2 types. It can either be sort of a control field, or it can be a better control field or fixed field. Same thing. And so the class here, this field class that's in PyMark represents one of these fields in the mark record. So it gives us ways to manipulate it and read and understand each of these fields. So the field then, because of how Mark is structured, Mark 21 is structured, it needs to be able to handle both these control fields, a fixed field, as well as these variable fields. And so that's what sort of this first what's called a method of this class does. So this is a special, so if you look right here, and I'm not going to spend too much time, I don't think, because we kind of covered this last time, but since 75% of you weren't here last time, I think it's okay if we spend a little bit of time here. So when you want to use this field, and I want to create a new field, when you create a new sort of what's called an object, so an object sort of uses this class as a template, and it actually, when you what's called instantiate it or create it, it becomes then a field object at that point. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to my Python shell, the idle, and I'm going to import PyMark. Unless you're not going to be able to do it with yours until you've downloaded and installed PyMark. So last time we spent, I thought, too much time trying to get it up and
I
going.
can do that.
So I'll help you
Okay.
outside of here, which you're interested in.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
I can do it on the normal server, but
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone else can.
so to use external libraries or libraries in Python, you use this this reserved or keyword called import. And so I'm going to import this PyMark module or library. So just type in PyMark, and nothing really happened. Now I've kind of loaded this. A lot happened in the background. But now I have PyMark is now available in my environment. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a new field. So I'll just go to new 245. So this PyMark is the entire library, and this field class is referencing this piece of code right here, this special double underscore init. That back in my shell here, when I do this, that's calling that same function or method in my code. So now, sort of the process for creating a new field is that the first thing it's looking for is a tag, in this case the number, then the indicators, and then any subfields. So there's a certain structure in how PyMark, this field class expects that. So I'm going to put in that, or I'm going to create a brand new 245 field or main title. So I'm just going to go ahead. Fine. And I'm just going to leave my indicator blank. And my subfield. Yeah, that's a bracket. Sorry. You can't see it. So let me boost up the size. Is that a little bit easier to see now? Yeah. Okay. So, and okay. So to create a new field, open bracket, the tag, the indicators, the subfield A. In this case, I'm just putting in a title for that subfield A. Now, if I hit enter, I've now created this new field. So if I type in new 245, what I get is the actual reference to that field object I just created in memory. So this sort of the notation here tells you the name of the class. In this case, it's pymark.field.field. It's an object. You just created it. And this right here is just its location in memory. You don't really need to worry about that. But that, you know, in case it totally blew up and you're looking at, you know, hardcore memory dumps, then you might care
You're
about
doing
that.
something way over our heads.
Even I don't get it if you mark it that way, for sure.
So you use brackets when there was to be square.
So right, so these square brackets versus the parentheses. Yeah. So anytime you instantiate a new object with a Python class, you'll use those regular brackets. So no.
These are quotes. What are the,
Oh,
what is this?
Yeah. So that's the tag.
Oh,
No,
sorry.
you're fine. You're fine. No, so that's a quotation or two quotations.
Oh, okay, that's
So-
how it comes. Okay.
So no, I mean that's fine.
So now,
The nice thing is if you use bad punctuation, it will at least tell you the stuff.
yes, so it's
No,
very,
it won't tell you what you should have. No, it will tell you.
right, it won't let you create. So if I, for example, I can, yeah, we can go off into and all sorts of fun stuff. But just kind of show you, so now in this new, if I want to see it, the tag. So type in the tag, it's 245. If I do this, so here I'm just trying to create a string. So this, when this little notation is I'm just outputting this in sort of the transmission format for the 245 field. So if you see, in Tiger or other things, sometimes you'll see a mark record in mark transmission format. That's all this is doing. So this kind of just shows you what it would look like, sort of in this transmission format. If I wanted to take my indicators, they're blank, what we would expect, and then subfields, there's my A subfield. So all this information that's associated with this field is now sort of what's we're talking about before, encapsulated into this object. So now I can get at that information. So I can get at the subfields, I can get at the indicators, all that's associated with that 245 field. So if I wanted to change it, or if I wanted to do something, I can actually manipulate that object to do that. Does that make some sort of sense? Okay. So the field class also has a number of different methods or other functions you can use as well. But for right now, I think that's sort of good enough. So now if we go back to the actual source code here, so a couple of things. So you saw, remember the tag, we had the sub indicators and the subfields. And then the last thing was this data. So and how PyMark distinguishes between fixed fields and control fields and variable fields is through two mechanisms. One is the actual mark tag. So there's some testing here, right here, that determines whether, so you can see right here this tag, if it's less than the 010, and if it's a digit, then it assumes that there's data coming in for that fixed field. Otherwise, it assumes it's a variable length field, and then it sets the indicators and so forth. So that's what this line 44 through 49 does. Is there's a logic that PyMark uses to determine what type of field, whether it's a fixed field or a variable field. So that's all what that sort of code up to that point. Does that hopefully sort of make sense, kind of looking at the real depths of what PyMark is doing here?
Can we use new to that to call that new object? Is it always something new?
You can name it whatever you want. So well, there are some certain keywords that are reserved by Python. So I can't, for example, say import equals, because import is reserved. Right.
Oh, and so you put new when you created the object.
Yeah, I just call it new 45. I could have called it, great new title. Right? So whatever I want to. So, I get general good rule of thumb in your coding is that you name your variable names with something that makes sense in the context of the code.
Short and logical.
Short and logical.
And don't use the same pictures for different things.
That's right. Because you have all sorts of bugs. So they'll help you with your debugging of code. To make it. And then another thing too is that if you write some code, you go back to it 5 months later, trying to understand what you were thinking at the time can be kind of a challenge. And I always cringe when I have to go back to it, especially when it's been produced. Yes, I did. So you notice right here, and Ed has done a pretty good job with commenting. So right here, everything you see in between these triple quotation marks at the beginning of this class, this is all common. So Python sort of ignores it, but it's here for human consumption. So this sort of tells you how to use this field. I'm not as good as I should be about commenting on my code, but I think that's a common problem people have. But it's so important to have good documentation and, with your code.
Even if you're not planning to share it with the other kids, because you're just fooling around, you can just sit in there and remind yourself what the heck you were trying to do. If you come back to it 4 days later, I was like, what was I even trying to solve with this stuff? Oh, that's what it was. Oh, I didn't like that.
So if you have any question, I think it's always better to be verbose in the commenting as opposed to sparse. You do exactly that. So now we're actually to the code that I sent around to today. So here's a new method for the field class, and it's actually a special method for Python classes. And this method is double underscore str underscore. What this is basically what happens if you try to create a string out of your object. So you'll notice when I went back here, go back to our code, I did this str. That's a Python reserved method for trying to convert whatever Python object into like a string representation of that object. So what Ed has done with the double underscore string, the string method, is create a method to display this field in that mark communication format, or whatever it is, what we saw before. So that's what the logic here. And here we can see, it's actually formally known as mark maker format. So when I want to print out a string or when I want to see it, this is what happens. So the first thing that goes through is it checks to see if this object is a control field, and if it is, then it sets this text. So it's creating this internal text variable in this method to this sort of format here. And because it's a control field, it doesn't have indicators or subfields. It just has fixed length data. And so that's what's happening here. He's assigning this sort of format, in mark maker format. If it's a control field, then he wants in this sort of if-then structure, basically saying where there's sort of a branch in this code right here for this. That's what this if and else structure or keywords do. That allows you to sort of fork the execution of your code. So depending on sort of the value of your variable, you're going to have two different paths. In this case, the test is if your field is a control field or not. So that's the first thing he's doing. He's running this method to see if it's a control field. If it's true, then he's doing line 69. If it's not true, then we assume it's a variable field, and then he's doing this additional processing. So he starts off with assigning the tag. Then for each indicator in the field's indicators, he's doing some replacement, and that's what he's assigning to this text. So he's kind of building upon this text here. Then, so he does that each for the indicators. Then for the subfield, for each of the subfields, he's doing some additional processing. And then the final thing what happens here is it returns that text. So going back to our shell here,
So if I do string new 245, and it helps to spell it out.
It doesn't really matter when you're just doing a line at a time, if you have an actual module that you're working on, it's so good. It tells you, you should go here, go look.
Right. For sure. So then I hit enter, and then so I call that double underscore string in the field class to create that print statement. So that's what in PY mark here. That's what's going on from line 55 to line 79. That is simple. Is how we create that. So, any questions? Before I move on? Mhm. And again, ideally, this is all being recorded to the YouTube channel, so hopefully, if we want to go back, reference this. So. Okay. Going back here. So the next couple are these methods. So just in general, whenever you see this reserved word called DEF, probably short for define, what follows is the actual name of your function or your method, depending whether you're creating a class or you're just in general creating a standalone function. The second, so this sort of defines what this method is expecting. And here, this underscore get item, double underscore, as you can see, it has put in some description here. And so basically this just retrieves the first subfield with a given subfield pulled in the field. So this is a sort of a shortcut method that Ed created to allow you to see what's going on with our subfields. So if we go back here, let's see if we can try that. So if I go new to 245, and since we only have the A subfield, that in fact retrieved then our A subfield. So that's this little code right here. That's all with this get item. That's what's fixed. Yeah.
Okay.
No, it's good.
What do you mean by self?
Okay, so that's a special, yeah. That's a good question. That's a real good question. Self is a special reserved keyword for when you're creating Python classes. And what it does, it just refers to the object itself. So remember when we created that new field 245? In the code, I need to somehow refer to that object that was created. And that's what that self.
What does it know right now we're talking about?
It knows, right.
It kind of needs to know it's working on itself and not going to function.
Right, because I can in the whole universe, I may be in my environment, and if I don't have a way to refer to myself, it can be a lot harder to manipulate. So this is just a sort of convenience way of how you create classes. And so whenever you create a class, method as it's called, or function, the first keyword or parameter in your method is always self. So, and that just refers to the object itself. So if we go back here to the very beginning, so in the init method here, you'll notice that self comes in as the first one here. And we can see that the self.tag, so it's actually assigning our tag after doing a little bit of formatting to this variable that's associated with the object. And so now in other methods, I now know that I have that variable associated with the object. So it's a way to sort of share variables among the different methods know that's a lot.
Okay.
That's
I'm
okay.
sorry. Is there a syntax for how you put what's in parentheses, or is it hierarchical, or is it just
So-
syntax?
So right here, you mean,
Yeah,
in the parentheses?
yeah.
So, there is, I think, to address it. So if you see right here, um, if you don't have, if it's just kind of standalone without anything else, and there's a comma, that means that this parameter is required. Now, if you see it equal to something, that's sort of a default value that's set to that indicator if you don't explicitly assign it. And likewise to none and then data. So what that does, um, it allows you I could quickly create a field and just create it with a tag. And then I may go back and change things later on, depending on how you program.
So it doesn't matter if they were taking words that were associated first.
Well, in here, no, but when you're defining it initially, all your required parameters have to come first before your sort of optional parameters. So that's the only sort of syntax, Python specific syntax.
And in methods, people always put subscripts. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know if that's required, but you never would put it anywhere other than subscripts.
Right, I don't,
really
technically,
think
I don't
they're
think, I don't think technically you need to do it, but you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Sort of Python convention for itself. So here, in our initialization, tag is required. So just to confirm that, so if I try to create a totally empty tag, so the p-line mark field, yeah, so I get an error message from the init that I'm missing that positional argument tag. So, and that's all, that error occurs because of how the code is written here in that init. Does that make sense? Okay. Good. So going here, so the last sort of helper method is part of this code snippet is this contains method. Basically, what this allows us to do is to test our field to see if it has a subfield. So going back to our example here, if I want to test to see if my new 245 field has a subfield B, I can just do this. And I'll get a false because there's no subfield B. Now if I do and change that to an A, I should get true. So that's what we expected.
Maybe, where the power comes in is that, it's not that you can find out if that one variable has an A in it, because you know it has an A in it because you just put it there. It's when you have new fields, like of 400 different fields, and you can tell it to go and check each one and then get back to you. That's where it starts actually being helpful. Because you don't want to go and look and see if it's in, but you can go and look for it.
So that's how you automate a lot of our record loads. We're doing exactly that. So there may be, so we've kind of developed over time sort of a standard mark record format that we like to see with certain mark record or certain fields and they're structured in certain ways. In particular, like the 856, we like a proxy, the URL with our LAN proxy. And so we may want to check to see if there's a subfield view in your 856 field. And so this construction will obviously do that too. And so how it actually does it. So get subfields, if you pass in your subfield, it returns a length, or it returns a list of all your subfields.
and so what happens if I pass in a subfield that doesn't exist, it returns back basically what's called an empty list. And I mean the list with nothing. And so so len is just a reserved Python method for length. So anytime I can pass in a Python variable that in some way has a length to it, that'll return its size or length. So for example, strings. So maybe going back to actually see it in action. That'd be helpful. So an empty list is just two brackets, and so it's 0. If I go back here, so here I have a list of 2 elements. Ideally, I should get a length of 2, and so on. I can also do length on a string. So this is fun, for example. And this will return back the length of how many characters are in that string. That can be really useful. All sorts of things beyond just mark and manipulation. Yes. So, so what's happening here is by doing this comparison, this greater than sign, this is a comparison greater than, less than, equal to, all return a true false value, or what's called a Boolean value. So it's a way to create a test. So here, he's basically saying if the length is greater than 0, return that evaluation. So if it's an empty, if I return a subfield that has nothing, so we have an empty list, that's going to return false. So for example, I can do greater than 0, that should return true. We do the blank 0. Oh, there we go. And it's false because it's equal to, it's not greater than. Do that? Okay, cool. I don't want to go too fast because I don't want to. So that's the end of this code snippet. I did include another code snippet from a different Python class. We can go look at that, or we could go through the field class. Or we have 15 minutes, so whatever you guys, if you have any questions. So
I don't know if it's possible for you to put this together on the screen, but is there any way that you could show us a mark field, a mark record that hasn't been processed,
oh yeah.
and then one that has?
I can really easily show you some all sorts of mark records. So, then I can show you how we can manipulate it.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Okay.
Once you see it in action.
Nice. Okay. So I'm going to be doing some other Python classes here. I'll sort of explain them, but I'm not going to go too much detail. That means,
Ideally, the 2 different mark records before and after processing will still look relative.
right.
They just don't have to be on the base.
Well,
That's the dream.
yeah. So, I'm going to grab. So these are all mark from our catalog.
That's a really nice file.
Yeah, and you and I were really creative. So I'm just going to grab. So this basically, so what John does is every few days, there's basically an incremental output of our mark records. So this is from the.
Anything that's been added to change. Another full one.
Output to where?
Outputting any of the mark records that have been changed or added into basically a big old handed a review file and it holds all of those mark records for you. Of course, you have to write a list before that, so.
Right, yes,
I see that.
So, I usually, if I'm on like Python, I'm messing with it in my head.
I'm putting that whole record into timeline.
Yeah, so I'll explain what I'm doing right here.
Oh.
Okay, so there's another class in the PY Mark library called the Mark Reader. And what you do is you send in the file, your Mark record
Here's the
file.
whole list of mark records.
Whole list of
Mark records.
And so you pass that in or you open it up. And this second one, 2 underscore Unicode code, I'm just forcing it to Unicode. So the other code snippet I have is actually all about Unicode manipulation because it can be such a pain, and it's good to understand what's going on. But at this point, just assume it. That I'm gonna save it in. Or I'm trying to force it to Unicode. So what I've done right now is I'm just now creating a new Mark Reader object for that incremental output file. And it's stored on an external hard drive I attach to my workstation. So that's what that new column that is. So I'm going to hit enter. And so nothing really happened. I basically created this reader, but I haven't extracted any records. I haven't done anything. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new list of all these records that are in this file. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to create a new sort of holder variable, a list variable, and then I'm going to go through all the records and save it to that list. So first thing I'm going to do is maybe, let's just go mark reps equals this empty list. Now I'm going to use this special syntax to loop through that file. So I'm going to go for each record in our mark file. I'm going to say append it or add it to my list that I created. So now, there might be a couple thousand. It may take a couple minutes. So don't worry about this. It's a little uglier than it is. But if we totally
It's doing it
fail,
the slow way, it's all good.
so. Okay, so it went through that entire list. Now to see how many, okay, there's a question for you. What method would I use to see how many records I have on my new list? Length. Right, absolutely. So, just to see how many I have, what did I call it? Mark reps. Pretty sure it was. Yeah. So now, so there's 1,500 mark records in that list. Now, I can examine, so in Python, it has a sort of a convention with lists. You want to refer to individual members of your list, you can refer to it by an index, where it's at. Now, the key thing to remember, it starts at 0 for the first position, not 1. So you're already, until you're thinking about that, it's really easy to get caught in the hot part. So just to be sort of cognitive of that. So the first item or member of the list is at 0, and you can see then, in fact, it's a PY mark record object located at this memory. Now, if I print that out,
So if I do this, string, so remember we talked about using string? That's that mark to make the format. And if I do this, I can actually make it look a little bit prettier. Instead of string, this print will actually print it nice and pretty. So now, if I do that, that should look sort of familiar from how we did it before. And you can see right here, you know, these right here, the 001 is an example of a control field, a fixed field. The 008 is another control field. 035 on down are all variable. So that's sort of looking at the structure. Going back to the field. So if I wanted to grab, let's say that 245 field, so why don't I do that? So I'm going to grab, you know, my mark 0.245. So again, I just made that up. There's no, and then if I do mark that's 0, with zeros, actually, so hopefully I didn't go too quickly. So here, what I did is I referenced this first bracket. I referenced the first record at position 0. And then this, again, like we kind of showed with the field, on the record, there's a sort of shortcut convention that if I pass in a tag, I can then retrieve that specific field. This came, I want to tell you there's a gotcha here. A gotcha?
Oh,
Doing this? So if you look right here, you might have, there's not a case, but no, there is actually. What happens if I do the 035? We have 2 fields there. It's just going to return the first one, but there's another 035 that exists. So if I want to grab all the fields for a particular tab, there's actually a method called.
The method that you just used wouldn't necessarily tell you that you missed a field.
Right, and that just grabs the first one.
Okay.
So that can be something just to be aware of. And that's been more than once. So there's this special method called get fields, and you can pass in any number of different tags. And then what this method does, it returns back a list of fields that match those tags. So if I just pass in 245, actually, let me do this. Let's say I'm interested in the 035s. So mark 035s. Well, the name here? No, the name, that's what I'm just calling. Yeah, it can be whatever.
And you could tell us to get fields between the 15 minutes to the 30 seconds.
I forgot that's what you were naming.
No, yeah, exactly. I mean, and the thing is, if you don't know how many, there could be multiple, now it can depend, depending on the mark tag, whether there's one or more. So,
If there's none, does it just?
yeah, I think it returns back a one. So now, if I just do mark, we can look at that. We can see it's in fact a list with 2 PY marks. And I could, now if I wanted to reference, so, so that's the second of 5. Yeah, second one, just second edition.
That's hard. You really have to really into your brain down there and over.
So you gotta do some programming and sort of it'll self-correct. After
debugging enough code. So, so that's the 035. Now, if I wanted to change something, I think that's what we were asking originally, right?
What if you wanted, what I'd like to see is if you change it in like a bunch of.
Okay, I'll tell you what we'll do, since we
Like
have that.
change all the 945.
We'll add a new 999. Okay, so for rec and mark recs. Let me see something.
Let me look this up.
Let's see what it is. Yeah, okay, good. So our first thing, let's just do a new 099. Or 0999. And just for fun, we'll actually just do that some of the doors. Not that it's meaningless, but that's all right.
We're fairly against.
And we'll just put in the one cycle there. Okay, so we move 999. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to try to add that to every single line coverage in our collection. So for rec, not recs, and we'll do rec, field, and okay, so 1500. Don't know whether it actually did anything. So let's go mark recs. And I'm just going to grab a random mark record out of that 1500 plus. Lo and behold, there's no 99.
The really powerful part is you can then use the if then structure to only add those 999s to things that already have some other thing that you can do with it. So you can just add the field or just change the field based on some criteria. Instead of you having to go through physically and say, does this thing have this criteria, then add this field. Is this one for all of those? It just doesn't.
For instance, if like if we were having horrible problems, we don't have a systems recruiter and person involved that has the skills like these, but they were having a horrible problem getting ebook records that had incorrect information like US check this out or we don't hold or this is a complete book. And so this would be a way that you could go and change.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what, we got finally here.
If you're doing like a data unit project, like Millennium or global update, yeah, we can do a global update and do that. But if we got records and all of them are always broken, then instead of doing all the
So you're having
you
to
run
do
it here and it does all three. That's a built on demand record. Built on demand, their full mark record set, the first half or two-thirds are full of broken diagrams. And over time, they slowly fix them, but they've never fixed the broken ones at the beginning of their collection. And so when we dump all the records and reload all these things up, massive broken diagrams again. So we went through and found, and they were consistently broken the same way all the time. So we found as many of those variations as possible, Jeremy put it in the app, and now you get new broken demand stuff, you run it, and if there are any of those that we found before,
But there's a
But
new
if
one.
somebody,
if there's new ones, then we're out of luck.
No, it's funny if somebody finds a new one, they can
Yep.
actually be like, hey, Jeremy, write some more code to fix this one.
Which has happened once.
Are you using this instead of Martha?
Well,
for a lot of stuff, yeah, this is so much easier, so we can change it once, it's done.
For batches.
For batch. So that's, time's up. So I don't wanna go longer, so I'm gonna be actually in Moab next Wednesday, camping.
Like for us.
Oh,
Yeah. For my girlfriend's
Gotta get
kids have
some
a
Moab
spring break,
before it's too hot.
so.
We'll see you
Diane,
there.
no, Diane has graciously offered to lead you the next tour guide. So,
But I'm like just remembering all the stuff as I look at it. It's like you want me in charge.
let's go back to your stuff.